Hello and welcome to this tutorial. I thought I'd do a few videos which show the absolute basics of Procreate. It is different to traditional art, but once you know the differences and once you know a little bit about workflow, then you're going to see all the advantages that digital art has to offer. Well, okay, there's the Procreate icon. I'm circling it now, and if I tap on it, the first place you go to is the gallery. This is where all your stored works are. This is some of the artwork I've done, but when you load up Procreate for the first time, you'll only see a few images that come with the program. And in the next video, I'll use my other iPad, which has a fresh install of Procreate, so we can start from the same place. But in this video, I just want to give you a quick overview to show you some of the things that Procreate can do. So for this, for example, supposing I load up the Kingfisher. This is from the Watercolour Masterclass. If you've done my Solid Foundations course, you might recognize Anna the Angler. That's the first project we do. But hopefully already you can see there are a huge variety of styles you can do with Procreate, like this, for example, or this from the Learn to Draw in the Digital Age with Procreate course. You can do illustration like this, or this from the Pastel Masterclass, hyper-realistic style, again from the Solid Foundations course, or this from the Pointillist Masterclass, or this, which is part of the tutorials for the Drippy Cat Art Studio. But you always come back to the gallery. Let's create a file and show you some of the absolute basics. Come to the plus sign in the top right, tap on that. You want a new canvas. And for now, we'll just go with screen size at the top, tap on that, and there's your canvas. In the top right, you can see a row of icons, and I've got my paintbrush selected. If I tap on that, these are the various brushes that you get within the Procreate library. So let's just choose something. Let's try pastels. Let's tap on Ravenswood, and we need a color for this as well. So let's come to where I'm circling. In the very top right, tap on that yellow circle and choose a color. Now to choose your basic color, you've got the outer ring. And if I move that around by dragging around with my pencil, you can see I'm going from turquoise through to blue, through to purples and reds. Let's try a nice bright orange color like this. And in that inner circle, you can see my orange inside that little circle, which I'm circling. But you can affect how light the color is. I'm getting kind of skin tones right the way through to white. Or you can come down to make things much darker, so I'm getting browns. And if you come kind of in this direction, the color gets less and less saturated until you get some very gray colors. So let's try a color about there, and let's just make a brush stroke. There we go. That is my basic brush stroke. And if I want, I can come to these sliders on the left, and I have two of them. I'm going to move the size slider to make my brush size bigger. There we go. Or I can move it down to make my brush size smaller. And if I make it bigger, I'm getting a very definite orange color. If I come to the bottom slider, this controls how transparent your brush stroke is. At the moment, I'm on full opacity. If I slide down to say, around about 40% and make the same brush stroke, can you see that's a little bit less intense? Let's make it even more transparent. And I'm getting a very light colored effect. If I want to change my color, I come back to my colors. I move to say a yellow color. Well, a cool yellow, more of a greenish color like this. So then I think, great, my first masterpiece. But then I decide, well, maybe I've gone a little bit too far. I want to undo some of those brush strokes. Well, come to the left-hand side of the screen, and where I'm circling, there's your undo button. I can tap on that to start tapping backwards. And underneath it, you have the redo button. Tap on that, and you start to go forwards through your brush strokes. But those two buttons are kind of redundant because all you need to do is take two fingers, tap on the screen, that undoes. If you want to redo, you tap with three fingers to redo. And if you just two-finger tap and hold, it steps backwards really quickly, so you're back to where you started from. Okay, so you may decide that white background is just a little bit too bright. Not a problem. Come to this icon, which I'm circling in the top right. That is your layers icon. If I tap on that, I'm drawing on a layer called layer 1, but underneath it, you've got something called background color. If I tap on that little white icon, which I'm circling, I can specify whatever background color I want. So let's try that. Okay, so you've got your brushes here, and each brush can do one of three things. Let's try Purple Star down here. Let's choose a color for it. Let's try a fairly brown color, again by moving the outer circle to get your basic color, and then I choose a darker version like this, and there's a different brush stroke. So I'm using Purple Star from the Pastels library. But that brush, along with every other brush, can do one of three things. I can paint with it. If I come to the next icon along, which looks like a little hand, if I tap on that and tap again to open it up. Now, what did we have? We had Pastels, Purple Star. I think that was it. With this, I can come to my brush strokes. Let's take the opacity up so it's got a powerful effect, and I can smudge these brush strokes. And then, if I come to the next icon along, this is my erase. And with this, if I come to the same brush again, Pastels, Purple Star, I can erase those brush strokes. Every single brush you can do three things with. Okay, so for this, we're not going to be drawing anything. We're just playing with what Procreate can do. All right, so let's try a slightly more intense color, and I'll draw here. Then I will come back to that layers panel, which I'm circling, tap on that, and I'm drawing on a layer called layer 1. If I come to this plus sign, which I'm circling, I can create a new layer, which, surprise, surprise, is called layer 2. Let's choose a different color. Let's try a yellow color, and I'll draw on top of what I was drawing. Actually, that's looking a little bit indistinct against that background, so I will two-finger tap to undo that. Let's choose a brighter color. We're not going for subtle just yet, and draw that. So that yellow brush stroke is sitting on top of the red brush stroke. Now I can do things like I can come back to my smudge tool and I can smudge those colors into each other like this, and starting to get some quite nice effects. But that yellow brush stroke is sitting on layer 2 above layer 1. If I come to the right hand side, you can see a little check mark. If I tap on that, that layer becomes invisible. If I tap on it again, it becomes visible. Layers are one of the fundamental differences between traditional art and digital art. Every digital art program will give you layers. And here's a nice thing. If I tap on that N, which I'm circling, it opens up a list of options. And at the top, I've got opacity. Now watch what happens when I take this slider, which is currently on max, and start to slide it towards the left. That yellow brushstroke is getting more and more transparent until eventually it's completely invisible. And if I drag towards the right, you can see that yellow brushstroke start to fade in again like this. Now already that's starting to prove very useful, but look, if I come to these icons on the left-hand side, they start to give you some options. Like, for example, if I tap on this one, this is my transform icon. And you can see at the bottom, I have a list of options. You might have freeform or uniform or distort or warp. Let's try uniform. And now I can put my finger inside that box of marching ants and I can drag this around. If I put my finger on the outside, I can do the same thing. I can drag it around. But here's the thing. Can you see I've got little dots in the corners and at the side? If I take one of those little dots and I just drag with my pen, I can make that brush stroke or whatever is on that layer smaller or bigger. If I come to something like distort at the bottom, I can take that and I can distort that surrounding box so I can change the shape of that brush stroke. And do you see that little green dot just above the box? If I take that, I can rotate whatever I've got selected. And if I drag outwards, so that green dot is further away, and I start to move, I'm getting much finer control about how I rotate that brush stroke. And so now the next thing people say is, well, this is great. How do I get out of this? Well, you don't. You move on to the next tool. So if I want to come back to my brushes, I do that, and those changes I've made are committed to that particular layer, and I can carry on making whatever brush strokes I want. Supposing I wanted to move just part of that layer, say the bottom bit of it, well, I can come to this icon. This is my selection icon, and I have a number of different options down the bottom. Let's try freehand. And now I can draw around whatever bit I want to alter. And I can come back and tap on that little grey dot where I started. That is my selection. If I now come to my transform icon, I can move this around to wherever I want it to go. I can rotate it. I can do whatever I want. And then come back to another tool to commit to that. Let's try that again. Let's come to our selection tool, and I can draw around, say, the top area like this. Come back to that little dot where I started, and if I tap inside there, that area is selected. So let's show you another one of these menus at the top. It looks like a magic wand with a little star. Tap on that, and I have a whole load of adjustments that I can do. And because I've selected part of this layer, only the bits that are selected will be affected. Because if I come to, say, the top one, hue, saturation, and brightness, I get 3 sliders at the bottom. And look at this. If I come to the hue slider and I move that around, look at that. I can alter the colours of that top area. I can control so they're very saturated and pretty bright, or I can make them so they're very knocked back and almost grey. In fact, I can make them completely grey and then just dial in the amount of colour that I want, or I can alter the brightness like this. And again, to get out of that, just come to any other tool. Let's try the paintbrush again. That will commit those colours. If I want to get rid of my selection, just come back to the select tool, tap on it again, and it disappears. You can have as many layers as your iPad will allow. The more RAM you have, the more layers you get, because each one of these layers takes up a certain amount of memory. Now, while we're in the layers, if I come to where I'm circling, which shows a little thumbnail of whatever is on that layer, and I tap on it, I get a list of options. So, for example, I can come to the top one where it says rename, and I could call this top layer, hit enter. This is a little tip right from the start. As you start to work with Procreate, you end up with plenty of layers. It is a very good idea to name at least some of your layers so you know what you're doing with each individual layer. Otherwise, you will spend many a happy hour turning the layers on and off, trying to figure out which layer you're supposed to be drawing on. And let me tell you from now, there will be times where you will end up drawing on a layer that you really didn't want to draw on top of, and sometimes that can lead to a lot of frustration. Just be ready for it. It will happen to you. It happens to everybody. Okay, that's most of the top icons covered, which is where you do most of your work. The only one we haven't taken a look at is this wrench icon, which I'm circling. Tap on that and you get a whole load of different things that you can do within Procreate. Like adding, for example, you can insert a photo or a file that will come in as a separate layer. For the canvas, there are various things to help you here. Like, for example, see where it says reference? Turn that on and you get a little box which you can drag around like this. You can resize by dragging one of the corners. And maybe you want to come to image, import image. This will take you to your Photos app. And supposing I wanted to bring up a picture of my cat, Luna, so I can start drawing with that. Those grid lines are already on that file. So please don't be confused if you load your own image and you don't see those little grid lines. I already drew those on that photo. That is because in the tutorials covering how to use the Drippy Cat Art Studio, we draw Luna and I explain how to do that and why that is a good thing. Come back to my wrench icon, turn off reference, it goes away. If I come back to my wrench icon, the share icon, that lets you put your image out into the world. If you're going to do that, you'll probably choose most likely a JPEG or maybe a PNG file, because a Procreate file will not load on most websites, but a JPEG will. So you just come to JPEG, it exports, and then maybe I might come to either AirDrop or save it to my files or whatever. Preferences, well, let's not bother with that for now. Okay, before we move on to the next video and actually draw something very, very simple, there are just a few more things I want to show you. If I come to my brush icon, tap on it, I'm in the Procreate library. This is the library of brushes that come with Procreate. I'm in pencils and I'm choosing the second one down called Scopus or Scopus or however you want to call it. I'll make my brush size a little bit bigger and I will scribble something. And now I'm going to turn my pencil over to the side. You see that? Now I'm pressing light, now I'm pressing hard. Then I'm going to bring my pen gradually upright, pressing light and pressing hard. If you're using an Apple Pencil, and I hope you are, because the people who make Procreate have said that they only provide support for Apple Pencils, and all Apple Pencils support this. Touch sensitivity. You press soft, you get a soft brush stroke. You press hard, you get a more definite brush stroke, but that will vary depending upon what kind of brush you're using. Some brushes will behave differently. Also, the nice thing about an Apple Pencil is if I hold my pencil upright, I get this. If I tilt it over, you get a different brush stroke. For this, it's like you're holding a real pencil in your hand. And if you point it straight down at your paper, you get a fine point. If you tilt it over to the side, you get what we're getting here. So that's something to be aware of. And I will come back to my layers panel. I will tap on the layer thumbnail, and then I'll come to clip, which just gets rid of everything on that layer. While I'm using a pencil, I'm going to draw a really awful circle. When I've finished, I'm just going to leave my pencil resting on the surface of my iPad. So, one awful circle, and rest for a second. And oh, look at this. I will then let go, and at the top, I get something called Edit Ellipse. This is assisted drawing. And if I tap on that Edit Ellipse, what I'm left with is a much smoother ellipse than I did, with 4 little control dots. And if I come to the top one, I can make the ellipse very narrow. I can also move from side to side and it rotates. If I come to the outside of the ellipse and just drag around, I can move the whole thing. If I come to inside the ellipse and drag around with my finger or my pen, I can move that around. If I rest my finger or my pencil on the actual line and drag that, you can see the ellipse gets bigger or smaller. If I move things in a little bit like this, I can get kind of a circle shape. And in fact, I'm going to come back to my drawing tool, which commits to what I've got. I'll try and make more or less a rough circle like that. And in the case of this, I get a tiny little triangle in the top. And if I tap on that, I've got a choice between an ellipse or a circle. So as round as you like. And also the nice thing about it is, can you see it's kept the width of the stroke and also how hard I was pressing. So I've got a faded brush stroke where I started and a thicker brush stroke where I finished. It doesn't have to be circles though. Have you ever said, oh, I could never draw because I can't even draw a straight line? Well, vaguely straight line. Hold and look at that. I get a little elastic band with a brush stroke. If I was to put another finger on the surface of my iPad and rest it, that brush stroke snaps to 15-degree angles. So you can get a completely horizontal or a completely vertical or a 45-degree or a 30-degree brush stroke. And I have at the top, edit line. I can take this line, I can move it to wherever I want, or I can come to the little blue control point and move that around. But wait, there's more. Tap again on my brush. I'm going to make a little zigzag shape, hold and rest until I get something called a polyline. Tap where it says that. And actually, I've got a whole load of points here, which I can drag around to make whatever I want out of those shapes. So this can be a real help. Now, all the brushes I've used so far have come from the Procreate library. This comes as standard with Procreate, but even with the basic installation of Procreate, there are plenty more brushes. I'm going to come to inside the Procreate library and I'm going to pinch inwards with my finger and thumb. Oh, look at this. You can have as many different Procreate libraries as you want. The Procreate library comes with Procreate. The classic library also comes with Procreate. And if I tap on that, there's a whole load of brushes that come with Procreate. There's one example. Good for doing clouds. Let's just clear this layer. And the classic library, until recently, this was the one library that came with Procreate, and you can do a lot of good work with it. But by default, if I pinch inwards again, the Procreate library gets shown first. But please don't forget about the classic library. It's kind of hidden away until you know about it. but there's loads of good brushes there. And you can set up your own libraries. I won't go into that here, but you can see I've got third party. There are plenty of good brushes around. And also I've got my own library, the Drippy Cat Brush Studio, which contains hundreds of brushes, along with loads of palettes, loads of papers and everything. There is a link to that in the description below for the complete studio, and also 5 core brushes from the studio, along with 2 paper textures, 1 regular paper and 1 watercolour paper, and that's free, so check that out. While I'm here, and this is the last thing I want to mention before we go on to the next video where we'll draw something very simple. Over the years, I have sat down with plenty of people with a digital art program. Now, quite a few of those people already know how to draw and paint using traditional media. And the process tends to follow a slightly predictable pattern. They sit down and I show them a couple of things, and they start to draw like I'm drawing now and like I want you to draw as well. And they experiment with various different effects. And you can see it in their faces. They start to become aware of all the possibilities, and they start to become intrigued, and they start to become excited. But look, this is a good case in point of what happens. If I make my brush size about the size of the end of my Apple Pencil, that is the kind of brush stroke I get. And that's very nice. And if I tilt over, yeah, I've set this brush up so that you get a different effect depending on the angle of the Apple Pencil. But then, for example, if I make the brush size very large, this is maximum. The size of my Apple Pencil has not changed, but if I make the brush stroke, look at that. I get a massive brush stroke, and this is where things start to become different. With a regular paintbrush, at all times I can see the bristles against my paper, and I can see and control exactly what that brush is doing, because I can see. It's physical. The hairs of the brush are sitting on top of the canvas. Well, it's not like this with digital. No matter what brush I use, let's try another one. Let's try something painterly. Let's try DC Square Texture 1. Let's choose a red colour from my Nouveau palette. Let's make it big, and it can become very hard to control the brush and what it's doing. And so I've got all these intriguing textures going on, but I can't control the brush strokes the way I can with traditional art. This becomes a point of frustration for a lot of people because they don't know how to control the brush strokes. What we've got on our screen at the moment is a whole load of really interesting possibilities. But those possibilities are just plain confusing and frustrating until we start to learn how to control the paint. Well, there are a few ways to do it. Let's show you one right away. Come to our Erase tool, tap on it. I'm still in my Procreate library. Let's choose a charcoal. Let's try Wakame. Let's try that. I'll make sure my opacity is set to 100%. My brush size, whatever size I want. But now I will pinch outwards to zoom in and focus on this area here, and look at this. This is a fundamental difference between digital art and traditional art. If you erase something with digital art, it is gone for good. It is not like, say, a pencil drawing where you get your rubber out and you start rubbing away and you can't completely erase the paper mark and it's made a dent in your paper and you rub too hard and you might end up slightly damaging the surface of your paper. No, with digital, once it's gone for good. And here's the interesting thing. We all know what an eraser or an eraser is like. It's a simple shape, but with this, let's try another one. Let's try Nut Grove. Let's try that out. And that gives me a different effect or a different texture when I start to erase. And if I lower the opacity right down, I can gradually build up my erase strokes to carve out an area like I'm doing now. Crank it up to 100%. Make a hard brush stroke, and everything has gone for good. Once you realize that the erase tool is not just there to get rid of your mistakes, you've got two-finger tap to undo for that, then you start to realize that your erase brush is every bit a creative tool as your regular paintbrush. And the more you embrace that fact, the more effective you become as a digital artist. So for now, I want you to do exactly what I've been doing. I just want you to scribble. Come here, let's come back to, say, the classic library, which you will have. Choose a brush, swordgrass, choose a colour. Let's come back to our disc, move around the outside, choose a shade and a saturation, and take a look at that. Vary the size of it. That gives kind of a charcoaly line. If you make it bigger, you start to get kind of a grass effect. Play with the opacity so you get soft effects and see how it builds up, because that's quite nice. Those build-ups of brush strokes, that will vary depending upon the brush. Let's try another brush. Let's come to charcoals again. Let's try 6B compressed. I bet that's going to be nice, even if the colour is a little bit vibrant. If I wanted to erase with that, well, at the moment, the erase tool is set to a different brush. But if I come back to 6B compressed, then I'm going to come to my erase tool, and instead of tapping, I'm going to press and hold with my finger or my pencil just for a second, and I get erase with current brush. And sure enough, if I open it up, yeah, I've got 6B compressed, the same brush I'm using to draw with. If I come up to the top of my library, I've got this little tab here called Recent. These are all the brushes I've used recently, so that's a quick way to access whatever brush you've used without having to remember where it came from. And again with this, just erase softly like I'm doing now, or erase hard like I'm doing now, and experiment. You need to get a feel for all the different things that you can do inside Procreate. When you run out of screen space, well, you could always just erase a whole area of colour like this, because remember, when it's gone for good. Or come back to your layers panel, tap on it, and come to clear. Start making your brush strokes again. Come back to your layers panel, press the little plus sign, choose a different brush stroke, put that in there, come to your smudge tool, experiment with different smudges. Let's try paints, let's try Achilles, and see what that looks like when you start to smudge, and it's looking quite interesting. So mental note to myself, try out Achilles on a future drawing if I want to smudge something, and just play around. This is kind of important, because one of the other points of frustration that I see with some very artistic and talented friends, and they see all the possibilities and they start to get excited. The problem comes when they start to try painting something that they recognize, because they haven't learned about workflow. That is the missing key if you really want to master Procreate. Anyone can show you the tools, but often you need to use the tools in a certain order, and you need to know a certain tool or technique in order to control the brush strokes. And trying to learn those tools while you're trying to paint something, whether it's from real life or your imagination, and you still haven't learned the tricks and the techniques yet, that's trying to do two things at the same time, and that can be very frustrating and very off-putting. So this right here, this is where you separate out, just getting a basic feel for how the brushes work, and really the only digital techniques we've talked about have been how to use layers, how to turn them on and off, how to transform them. And the more complicated the thing you're trying to draw or paint is, the more frustrating it becomes. Now, if you click on the links below, I have a couple of top-rated courses over at Udemy that go into this workflow, and those links carry a special discount price on the course. But in the next video, we're going to draw something very simple, and in that video, we're going to talk about the all-important workflow, and you're going to see some extra techniques which let you control the paint so that you can do what you want with Procreate. I hope you'll hit like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.